Thank you, Mr. Secretary. CBS News went inside Enzel Duas Park, where a tent city sprung up overnight because a public park outside is the only available option left for local officials and NGOs now scrambling to test and quarantine families released from U.S. custody. The McAllen mayor reminded us immigration is a federal responsibility. The head of Catholic Charities here in the Rio Grande Valley says she wants the federal government to tell her, we'll take over here. Is there a plan to deploy federal resources and personnel, FEMA or National Guard boots on the ground, for instance, to test and quarantine migrants released from federal custody? And what is your message to local leaders issuing local disaster declarations because they've run out of options during this pandemic?
So thank you very much. I visited the park earlier today. I met with Sister Norma and other individuals who are doing extraordinary work there. We, of course, in the federal government, do testing, isolation, and quarantine. We work with non-governmental organizations as well, and we set up an architecture. Dr. Pritesh Gandhi has done an extraordinary job over a number of months where we are able to reimburse the non-governmental organizations for the expenses that they incur in testing and isolating and quarantine, if and as necessary, the migrant population. The park is outdoors. It is the safest way in which we can accomplish that testing and isolation in an outdoor setting, and those individuals are tested positive, and we're working very carefully with Sister Norma, and we had a discussion earlier today, and I will be meeting with her later today as well to discuss the mechanics and what more we can do. It's a very successful partnership, and we have to devote more resources to it, and we will.
Secretary, thank you for this conference. So you mentioned that the U.S. has started to send migrant Central American families deeper into Mexico as a strategy to prevent them from traveling north again. Is this part in response to the pushback that Mexico has that you've experienced, that the U.S. has experienced in receiving some of those Title 42 families, or is this, these changes reflect some of the new international coordination to stem migration?
So this is a response to something that I referred to in my opening remarks, which is the fact that we are seeing a significant amount of recidivism in the context of individuals who've been expelled under the CDC's Title 42 authority. They have not been placed in immigration enforcement proceedings under Title 8. Instead, we use the Title 42 authority to basically turn them around. But if in fact they are turned around and placed in the northern part of Mexico, it is too facile, too easy for them to return and try an illegal entry again. And so in response to that recidivism, to deter and prevent that recidivism from occurring, we are expelling them further into the interior of Mexico, where it's far more difficult to try again.
Victor with Voice of America. How many flights and how many people have been taking place over the last week or a month, sending them back to Tapachula? And how is Mexico responding to sending Central Americans within Mexico, I guess?
So I will have to get back with to you on the specific data with respect to the number of flights. But what we are doing in terms of our enforcement efforts is in collaboration with the Mexican government. For the second time, I traveled to Mexico, but 2 days ago, to speak about the need to increase the number of flights into the interior of Mexico to deter that recidivism. We are speaking with Mexico in the context of our overall relationship, not just on issues of migration, but on issues of economic partnership, such a significant trade and travel partner of ours, one of the most significant trading partnerships in the world. In that context, we're speaking about what greater interdiction efforts they can employ to stem the flow, and we are of like minds in that regard.
Oh, thank you, Telemundo Network. Secretary, I want to know what is your perception about the migrant crossing in this moment? Increase the number, but consider it is very serious a problem. And the second question is, just being in Mexico, do you have a special agreement with Mexico talking about the Title 42? It's possible.
I wasn't, so forgive me, I'm not sure I caught your first part of your question, but I will say this about my 2 trips to Mexico. The partnership is extraordinarily strong. We have a shared interest in enforcement, and we have a shared interest in humanitarian relief. The fact that those 2 coexist in addressing this challenge makes it that much more complex. We will stop illegal immigration. That is our responsibility. At the same time, individuals who qualify for humanitarian relief under United States law, laws that Congress has passed, will be granted that relief. We will not turn our back on the laws of accountability nor on the laws of humanitarian relief.
Thank you so much, Secretary, for taking my question. Anastasia Bolton, KENS 5 in San Antonio. How do expulsion flights to southern Mexico comply with our asylum laws and administration's verbal commitment that you reiterated today of a humane immigration system? Because the administration is dropping people off in the middle of Mexico. They have no resources and no way back home. Thank you.
So we are working with Mexico to ensure that the individuals who are subject to the expulsion flights, their needs are addressed. We have a responsibility under the Public Health Authority of the Centers for Disease Control to protect the American public. We are in the midst of a pandemic that has not only gripped this country, as I think we all know, but has gripped the world. And it is in the lawful exercise of that public health authority that we are executing those expulsion flights in the service of the public health, not only of the American public, but of the migrants themselves.
We have time for just one more. Sandra?
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Secretary.
It's a little hard for
Can
me
you
to-
hear me? Good
Yes.
afternoon, Mr. Secretary. Question, want to revisit the COVID testing conversation that you had a little bit earlier. There are some communities like Laredo that do not have NGOs that have set up testing ability, and there's some pushback that's starting to begin from those communities who are refusing to accept migrants from, say, the RGV family units who are being sent because they are showing a COVID positivity rate. Can DHS test those family units prior? What are you doing to alleviate that concern in those areas?
I'm glad you asked that question because this is an area of significant focus of ours. We have built an architecture. The fact of the matter is there are communities that have greater capacity than others. Some communities have greater non-governmental organization capacity than do others, and we are building new processes to make sure that the migrants are tested, cohorted during transportation, isolated and quarantined as necessary, and we are surging federal resources to address that need.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all very much for joining us.